Ever wonder what superfoods fueled the Vikings on their long sea voyages? It wasn't some ancient protein shake, but something far more practical. The porridge system. Picture this! Massive cauldrons filled with oats or barley cooked into a thick, dense paste. Then, huge amounts of butter and salt were mixed in. This wasn't your morning oatmeal. It was a survival food designed for the high seas. Think of it like a medieval energy bar. This porridge paste would congeal into a solid block. Vikings could cut off a piece and eat it cold, or mix it with a little water to make it more palatable. This simple meal provided a staggering 2,000 to 3,000 calories a day, giving them the energy needed to row, fight, and survive the brutal North Atlantic cold. So next time you grab an energy bar for a hike, remember the Vikings had their own version over 1,000 years ago. Simple, effective, and calorie-dense. Visual comparison of a Roman ship with smoke rising versus a sleek Viking longship. Ask, why did one freeze while the other cooked? Reveal the strategic choice. Speed and safety over warmth. Vikings were masters of fire, with roaring hearths warming their longhouses on land. Yet, at sea, a strict ban was enforced. No open flames were allowed aboard their wooden longships, a stark contrast to their Mediterranean counterparts. Cultures like the Romans and Byzantines often carried braziers for cooking and warmth on their galleys. So why did the seafaring Norse choose the biting cold over comfort? It was a calculated decision. A stray spark on a wooden ship filled with tar and sailcloth meant certain disaster. Foregoing fire also saved precious cargo space and, most importantly, kept the longships light and agile. This allowed for unparalleled speed and the element of surprise in their raids. It was a classic trade-off. They sacrificed the comfort of a warm meal for the unmatched capability of their vessels. The strategic choice was clear: speed and safety over warmth. Show a map with dots popping up all over the North Atlantic coastline. Zoom in on Torksey. Describe it not just as a campsite, but a logistical hub or Viking truck stop that made their sea voyages possible. When we picture Vikings, we often imagine them endlessly at sea. But the reality is they relied on a vast network of coastal bases to make their journeys happen. Archaeologists have documented over 200 of these sites, stretching from Norway all the way to Newfoundland. A prime example is the winter camp at Torksey in England. Spanning more than 55 hectares, it was far more than just a place to wait out the cold. These bases were like ancient service stations. They served as warming hubs, food preparation centers, and even temporary homes for families. Workshops were set up for crucial repairs and trade, making this hidden infrastructure the true engine of the Viking Age. Close up on raw wool, explained lanolin and water resistance. Narrator wears a modern heavy coat versus a Viking wool tunic. Pour water on both to show how the Viking gear stays warm. Wool was the Viking Age's high-tech fabric, essential for thermal regulation. The secret is lanolin, a natural oil in sheep's wool that makes it remarkably water-resistant. This meant Vikings could stay warm even in the harsh, damp conditions of the North Atlantic. Unlike many modern materials, wool retains its insulating properties even when it gets wet. This was a life-saving feature for sailors facing sea spray and rain. A wet Viking was a warm Viking. To maximize this effect, crews used a sophisticated layering system. A linen undertunic wicked away sweat, while multiple layers of wool trapped air, creating a personal insulation zone. This was far more effective than a single heavy garment. When compared to some modern synthetics, which can lose all insulating ability when soaked, this ancient technology is surprisingly effective. This simple, natural fiber was the key to their survival and exploration. Recreate a scene inside a longhouse or tent. Vikings playing a board game, laughing. Narrator explains. They aren't just passing time, they are generating heat. In the unforgiving cold, a warrior's greatest battle was often fought within their own mind. A strong mental state directly fueled physical endurance, turning despair into determination. Archaeological finds reveal this truth. Dice and game boards, like Hinnefataf, were common in camps, proving that play was as vital as a sharpened axe. These weren't mere distractions. Social activities From boisterous storytelling around a crackling fire to organized games were structured rituals designed to forge bonds and bolster spirits. They were a deliberate defense against the isolating chill of a long winter. For a Viking, high morale was a tactical advantage, a psychological fire that could warm the body when the hearth's embers grew cold. It was the understanding that a unified, spirited group could outlast any hardship the frozen lands threw at them. A diagram of Viking crew sleeping positions shows them packed together, side by side in a long row. This wasn't just for comfort. It was a critical survival tactic. By huddling, they drastically reduced individual heat loss to the cold air, a simple but effective application of thermal physics. Each person acted as a human heater for their neighbors. This communal approach extended beyond just sleeping. The crew collectively cared for their wool and leather clothing, ensuring it stayed dry and functional. Dry layers are essential for insulation, and teamwork made this constant maintenance possible. They also organized watch rotations, not just for navigation and safety, but to allow others uninterrupted, restorative sleep. This coordination ensured the entire crew remained alert and physically capable. The 2007 Sea Stallion experimental voyage provided definitive proof of these strategies' effectiveness. The data confirmed that in the harsh North Atlantic conditions, core body temps stayed safe solely through cooperation. Ever wondered how Vikings managed those epic sea voyages? It wasn't just about raiding. It was about incredible logistics. Think of a modern prepper's pantry, stocked for any disaster. Now, imagine that pantry on a longship, floating on the open ocean for weeks. That was the Vikings' reality. Archaeological digs, like those in York, reveal the sheer scale of their planning. What was on the menu? Forget fresh feasts. We're talking mountains of dried fish, like cod so dry it was almost like wood. Add to that hardtack biscuits baked to be rock solid and last forever, and fermented dairy products like everything was designed for long-term storage, requiring no cooking at sea. This wasn't just about food. It was a sophisticated supply chain that allowed them to project power across the world. Long before the first axe was swung, it was their logistics that won wars. Ever seen those movies where Vikings are just screaming their way through a hurricane at sea? Yeah, that's not quite right. The real story is way cooler. Real Vikings weren't just tough guys looking for a fight with a storm. They were brilliant strategists and engineers. They knew their limits and, more importantly, they knew the sea's limits. Sailing in a brutal winter storm. Nope! They were smart enough to wait for the right weather. They'd meticulously plan their voyages, calculating the best times to set sail. Their incredible success didn't come from just gritting their teeth through hardship. It came from smart planning, superior ship technology, and knowing when to go and when to stay home. They prioritized the success of the mission and the safety of the crew over proving how tough one person was. So, next time you think of Vikings, think smarts, not just muscle. In 2007, an audacious experiment set sail. A crew of 64 modern-day adventurers embarked on the Sea Stallion, an exact reconstruction of a Viking longship, to sail from Roskilde, Denmark to Dublin, Ireland. Their mission: to prove that ancient shipbuilding and seafaring techniques were as effective as the sagas claimed. They faced the same brutal North Atlantic conditions as their Viking predecessors, with no modern heating systems to shield them from the cold. One of the greatest challenges was surviving the frigid nights. The crew had to rely on a Viking-era technique known as social warming, huddling together in tight sleeping bags, sharing body heat to stay alive. It was a test of endurance and community. After 6 challenging weeks at sea, the Sea Stallion triumphantly sailed into Dublin Harbor. The voyage was a resounding success, proving not only that the Vikings could make such journeys, but also validating the incredible ingenuity and resilience of their methods. From the windswept shores of Scandinavia, they exploded across the known world. They reached North America 500 years before Columbus. They laid siege to Constantinople, the greatest city on earth. They built an empire that stretched from Russia to England, and they did it all in open longboats on the freezing, unforgiving seas, often without fire. Why? Because they chose the cold. They embraced hardship. For the Viking, the survival of the crew, the success of the mission, was everything. Personal comfort was a luxury they gladly sacrificed. This wasn't just a strategy, it was a philosophy, a collective mindset that made them fearless, relentless, and utterly unstoppable. While others huddled by their fires, the Vikings were out on the waves, carving their names into history. They didn't need fire, they had each other. Ever wondered how Vikings survived crossing freezing oceans without fire on their ships? It wasn't because they were primitive, but because they were incredibly smart. On a wooden longship, a single stray spark could mean total disaster. The entire vessel, along with its crew and cargo, could be engulfed in flames within minutes. For Vikings, speed and safety were everything. So, they made a brutal but brilliant trade-off. They chose survival over comfort. This meant no onboard cooking and no fires for warmth. Instead, they relied on preserved high-calorie foods, like dried fish and meat, which they ate cold. This system kept them safe from fire and also made their ships lighter and faster, allowing them to outmaneuver their enemies. They understood that while the cold was uncomfortable, fire was a far deadlier threat at sea. It was this calculated risk that helped them dominate the waves for centuries. Follow for more incredible Viking history. Ever wonder how Vikings managed to conquer the freezing seas and new lands? It wasn't just their legendary bravery. It was their food engineering. They had a secret weapon, a superfood, that kept them going for weeks on end. They would cook massive batches of grain, like oats or barley, and then mix it with loads of butter and salt. This mixture would harden into a dense, high-energy paste. It was basically an ancient protein bar, but way more effective. They didn't need a fire to cook it or a warm place to eat it. Just one scoop of this stuff packed enough calories to fuel hours of brutal rowing through icy waters. We're talking about 3,000 calories a day to survive the harsh conditions. So, was it primitive? Not at all. It was extremely efficient survival technology. Follow me for more incredible secrets from ancient history. Have you ever wondered what made Viking longships so incredibly fast? You might think it was their design or their sails, and you'd be partly right. But a huge, often overlooked secret to their speed was something you'd never expect. They were cold. I mean, really cold. Viking ships had no stoves, no chimneys, and no heavy heating equipment whatsoever. Why does that matter? Less weight means more speed. By sacrificing comfort, the Vikings made their ships lighter and faster than their enemies. This speed was their ultimate weapon. It allowed them to launch surprise raids, appearing out of nowhere, and then make a clean escape before anyone could react. So, the next time you think of Vikings, remember this. Being cold didn't slow them down. It's what made them so deadly and unstoppable on the water. That's why Viking ships could outrun just about everyone. Think Vikings were just tough sailors freezing on long voyages across the open ocean. That's a common image, but the reality is much smarter. They didn't just endure the sea, they mastered it through strategy. Instead of spending weeks on end in the cold, Vikings made frequent stops along the coast. Imagine a vast network of harbors and temporary camps stretching all across Europe. These weren't just random pit stops. They were carefully chosen locations where Vikings could land their longships, cook hot meals, repair their vessels, and rest. They even built winter bases, called long forts, to wait out the harsh seasons. So, the sea wasn't their home. It was their highway. The land was their lifeline. It was this incredible logistical planning, this network of shore camps that made their famous long-distance raids and explorations possible. It wasn't just about brute strength. It was about brilliant planning. Think your fancy modern jacket is the best thing for staying warm and dry. Think again. The Vikings had us beat 1,000 years ago. While your expensive coat gets soaked and leaves you shivering, Viking clothing was built differently. Their secret weapon. Whoa! It's a natural wonder that retains its insulating properties even when it's completely wet. So, while you'd be freezing in a modern jacket during a downpour, a Viking could stay warm. They mastered the art of layering, using multiple wool garments to trap body heat efficiently. This system worked with their bodies, creating a personal microclimate that kept them comfortable in the harshest conditions. No advanced technology, just a deep understanding of natural materials. They didn't fight. nature. They adapted to it with brilliant simplicity. Ever picture Vikings as fearless warriors charging into icy seas no matter the season? Well, the truth is a bit more strategic. The real reason Vikings dominated the seas wasn't reckless bravery. It was brilliant planning. They almost always avoided sailing in the winter, and not because they were afraid of a little cold. They respected the North Atlantic's fury. Winter meant unpredictable storms, dangerous sea ice, and much shorter days for navigation. A single mistake could be fatal. These weren't just raiders. They were master mariners and traders. Their goal wasn't a heroic death at sea. It was survival and profit. By sailing with the seasons, not against them, they ensured their ships, cargo, and crews returned safely. This smart risk management allowed them to build a vast network that stretched across the known world. It was their discipline, not just their courage, that defined their legacy. Ever picture Vikings as fearless warriors charging into icy seas no matter the season? Well, the truth is a bit more strategic. The real reason Vikings dominated the seas wasn't reckless bravery. It was brilliant planning. They almost always avoided sailing in the winter, and not because they were afraid of a little cold. They respected the North Atlantic's fury. Winter meant unpredictable storms, dangerous sea ice, and much shorter days for navigation. A single mistake could be fatal. These weren't just raiders. They were master mariners and traders. Their goal wasn't a heroic death at sea. It was survival and profit. By sailing with the seasons, not against them, they ensured their ships, cargo, and crews returned safely. This smart risk management allowed them to build a vast network that stretched across the known world. It was their discipline, not just their courage, that defined their legacy. Ever wondered how Vikings survived those brutal, freezing winters, especially when they couldn't light a fire? The answer is surprisingly simple. Each other. In the biting cold of the north, warmth wasn't just a personal comfort. It was a group strategy. Vikings would huddle together, sharing body heat under thick animal-hide cloaks. They slept in tight quarters, literally using one another as living furnaces. It was a communal effort. They even had sleeping rotations, so no single person was left exposed to the elements for too long. This wasn't just about staying cozy. It was a matter of life and death. The cold punished anyone who tried to go it alone. Cooperation was their source of heat, a powerful lesson in survival psychology. Did you know that when Vikings set out on their long, brutal sea voyages, they packed games? But not just for fun. It was a matter of life and death. On the freezing open ocean, it's not the cold that breaks you first. It's your mind. The endless gray, the biting wind, the sheer isolation it can shatter a person's will to live. The Vikings understood this. They knew that a strong mind keeps the body warm. So they fought back with stories, rivalries, and board games. These weren't just past, they were tools for survival. The competition and camaraderie kept their minds sharp and their morale high, giving them the mental endurance to push through unimaginable hardship. They were masters of psychological survival, long before psychology was even a word. This mental fortitude is what allowed their crews to conquer the impossible. How did the Vikings conquer the seas in open boats with no heaters and zero comfort? It wasn't by suffering. It was by thinking smarter. For them, every decision was about strategy, not convenience. Imagine this. You're in the North Atlantic. Waves are crashing, and the wind is biting cold. You don't have a warm cabin. But what you do have is a plan. The Vikings traded personal comfort for something far more valuable: speed and efficiency. Their longships were light and fast, designed to raid and return before enemies could react. They also prioritized cooperation. Every single person on that boat had a role, working together like a well-oiled machine. It wasn't about enduring the cold. It was about mastering the elements through sheer discipline and brilliant planning. Their choice to prioritize strategy over comfort didn't just help them survive. It allowed them to dominate and change the course of history. Thanks for watching. If you love history that defies the odds, make sure to subscribe for more.